World War III. We all thought it was going to be over Iran, but it might actually end up being over Venezuela, or who knows what is next. All I know is that we continue to march closer and closer into war. The United States seized a oil tanker that was actually sailing under the Russian flag. The United States says, oh, no, it was stateless. But the Russians are saying, no, it wasn't. It was actually our tanker. It was lawfully sailing under the Russian flag, and it was protected at points by Russian naval vessels. And yet the United States still ended up capturing this oil tanker. The U.S. says this. U.S. Southern Command says in a pre-dawn action this morning, the Department of War, in coordination with the Department of Homeland Security, apprehended a stateless sanctioned dark fleet motor tanker without incident. The interdicted vessel, the MT Sophia, was operating in international waters and conducting illicit activities in the Caribbean Sea. The U.S. Coast Guard is escorting Sophia to the U.S. for final disposition. Through Operation Southern Spear, the Department of War is unwavering in its mission to crush illicit activity in the Western Hemisphere. We'll defend our homeland and restore security and strength across the Americas. Now, the Sophia was likely sailing stateless. It didn't seem to be having a flag. It had gone dark, essentially. But the other boat, the other oil tanker, had been flying under the Russian flag and at one point was escorted by a Russian submarine, and they ended up capturing it near Ireland, so all the way over in Europe. Christy Nome has to say, in two pre-dawn operations today, the Coast Guard conducted back-to-back, meticulously coordinated boarding of two Ghost Fleet tanker ships, one in the North Atlantic Sea and one in international waters near the Caribbean. Both vessels, the motor tanker Bella and the motor tanker Sophia, the Bella 1 and the tanker Sophia, were either last docked in Venezuela or en route to it. Under President Trump's bold and visionary leadership, U.S. Coast Guard tactical teams worked closely with its counterparts at the Departments of War, Department of Justice, and State, and used their specialized expertise to conduct these operations and conduct two safe, effective boardings within hours of each other. One of these tankers, motor tanker Bella 1, has been trying to evade the Coast Guard for weeks, even changing its flag and painting a new name on the hull while being pursued. Right, it changed its flag to, the Russian flag, and its new name was the Marinera. Is that right? Is it the now that I'm saying it? Yeah, it is the Marinera. Okay. It's like, really, the Marinera? Yes, the Marinera.
Shalom. First thing and foremost, I want to give all praises and glory and honor that's due to Yahweh Bashim, Yahweh Shai, Bashim Rakakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and elders, a great millstone, blessings and salutations to the whole elect. And those in the gospel, brother, lifting up the standard of Yahweh Bashim, Yahweh Shai, wherever it may be. This is another quick lesson through the Spirit, Lord, would it be edifying. It says, U.S. seizes Russian oil tanker escalating into World War III. As this is Kim Iverson, which is an investigative journalist. She goes into geopolitics, and she's basically going into the account of them capturing Maduro and basically United States seizing the oil because allegedly the United States have control over Venezuela, allegedly. But from different sources out there, you have roughly, because you got Colombia, you got Cuba, you got Colombia, you got Mexico, you got the Latin world that's technically up in arms against Esau, and with Colombia, Venezuela, generally you have like up to 6 million troops, boots on the ground, or that could be potential boots on the ground, which will pose a hazard for the United States. And not only that, the Chinese, which will pose a direct threat to the United States because of the amount of troops they have. But United States allegedly captured a Russian oil tanker, I believe, which they do business with Venezuela and Iran, and then you have China, which they all have financial ties to Venezuela's oil. So in tandem, they all work together, which will bring America into a global conflict with these said three nations, because that's biblical prophecy. God damn. So anyway, America's playing a dangerous game with Russia, man, because now you got Putin threatening to strike the U.S. based on certain parameters of their dealing or offsetting their business and dealing with the allies, man. You got them ready to pretty much threaten America with war, man. So either way it go, this whore is getting ready to be dismantled. Because not only that, this devil was talking about taking Denmark, which, you know, I'll go into that on a later lesson. But he's talking about taking Denmark, which is a direct ally to NATO, which America is part of NATO, which stands for National Atlantic Treaty Organization, man. So it's not looking too good for the West. And we know that the West, or America, is really in panic mode because they only have so many plethoras of crude oil left, man. So Venezuela being one of the richest reserves in oil in the world. Okay, I'm talking about hundreds of billions of gallons of oil that has been untapped, and America wants to go down there and tap it and utilize it and pretty much process it so they could continue to fund their operations in the West and really war. Okay, because if you look at the West, the economy is collapsing, and this will be something that can put the economy back in state. I know certain states that I saw, mainly in Kansas, I think gas went down to like $1.90-something, which we haven't seen that prior to the war in Ukraine back in 2022. So, you know, and gas is roughly still cheap here. I think here in Kansas City, gas is like $2.44, which is, you know, it's not bad. You know, it's doable versus like New York, Chicago, LA, you talking about $5-6 a gallon. But either way it go, this is a step towards World War III. And hey, Yahweh Shai is making his moves, man. All right, because essentially World War III won't become a nuclear hot war until the RFID chip is mandated. But the puzzle pieces and the tensions will be there prior to the chip, because that way the economy collapsed, the chip is mandated, global collapse rolls right into war, and the tensions are already there. Okay, so essentially that's what it is. So let me get a preset real quick. It's not going to be a long lesson, but this is something we have to watch closely, because this is the spirit of the Lord, man. All right, Ezekiel 38 is getting ready to jump off the pages, because what are the chances that all these nations is being backed by Russia has some dealings with Venezuela to some degree, mainly Iran and China, which China is a superpower within itself. So this is the book of Jeremiah 51, and I'm going to start at verses, where I'm at, the spirit of the Medes. Here we go, 51, and I'm going to start at verses 11. It says, make bright the arrows and gather the shields. Yahweh raised up the spirit of the king of the Medes for his device against Babylon to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance of his temple, right? Now you go into the ancient Persians and Medes, or the Medo-Persian Empire, you understand that the Medes were taken down by Cyrus the Great, okay, which is of the Persians. And then what happened to the Persians? They was taken down by the Greeks. But you had Medo-Persia, which you go into the book of Daniel. I believe it's Daniel, I think it's Daniel, the 7th chapter or the 8th chapter. But it breaks down the he-goat. And then it goes into how when the Persians and the Medes were taken down by the Greeks, and then the Greeks merged and became a great kingdom, which the Greeks were originally Japhetic peoples. And then when the Greeks were taken down by Alexander the Great, Slovakia, when the Japhetic peoples was conquered through Alexander the Great, which basically was the Greeks, he assumed the identity of the Greeks. And over a course of time, the Romans took them over, which became the Greco-Roman Empire, which essentially is the same people, Edomites, man. But they were not originally Edomites that assumed those lands. Like the land of Gog and Magog, they were ancient Japhetic peoples, which were people of color, man. Okay? So, little history here. It says, the Medes and Persians are closely related to Indo-European peoples, which Europeans were dark-skinned people, who inhabited the ancient Iran, okay, which is the Persians today, Iranians today. The Medes established the first Iranian empire, conquering the Assyrians. They conquered the Assyrians, but themselves overthrown by the Persians under Cyrus the Great around 550 BCE, which stands before Christian era, leading to formation of the vast Alchemid Persian Empire, which united both peoples and became a dominant world power. It says they shared similar language and customs, and the Persians eventually absorbed the Medes into a larger empire, which goes into the Medo-Persian Empire. All right. Yep. So anyway, that's good history there. So going back to the precept, And it says, and make bright the arrows and gather the shields. The Lord have raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes. Okay. Because you're going to have Iran and Russia, which is going to be a primary thorn in the side of Babylon the Great, especially over this whole crude oil business. All right. Which America is using it for one thing, because they're greedy. Okay. America has untapped oil reserves as well, you know, but they want to take everybody else's shit. For his devices against Babylon, America. So when you see that word Babylon, and predominantly in this chapter, you can interchange that with America, because this is future prophecy. This is biblical prophecy. This didn't occur in ancient Babylon, by the way. And it says to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance of his temple. But set up the standard upon the walls of Babylon and make the watch strong. Set up the watchmen, prepare the ambushes, for Yahweh have both devised and done that which he spake against the inhabitants of Babylon, man. All right. Which is America. So this place is going to be destroyed. All right. So let's go back to the video here.
So she goes on to say, you know, they've been chasing, and they have been. They've been chasing that particular tanker for a couple of weeks, trying to lock it down. It finally sails into the North Atlantic Sea, up by Ireland and Iceland, in that region, and that's where they captured it. She says the heroic crew of the U.S. Coast Guard, Monroe, pursued this vessel across the high seas and through treacherous storms, keeping diligent watch and protecting our country with the determination and patriotism that make Americans proud. What exactly is the Trump administration trying to get at here? So you're saying that you're protecting the country by confiscating an oil tanker from Venezuela to Russia. So this was Russia.